Hi, my name is Lynn Toler. You may know me best as the judge on divorce court or from my position on marriage boot camp, but I do a number of things and I have a number of interests, and one of them is child safety. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. I was elected to a judgeship at 33 years old, and I did 10 years on the bench in a municipal court where it was where the regular people go when they get caught doing irregular things. So it's the home of domestic violence and family upset. It's the home of fights and barking dogs and DUIs. So I see normal people when they get in trouble. From there, I went to divorce court where I watched couples over 13 years, day after day, bring me their issues. I've been married for 32 years myself and have 6 kids. So I know a great deal about relationships, about people, and about how to manage your relationships. So today I'm bringing you a 3-part series on child safety. I had conversations with 3 very different people that have 3 very different perspectives on this very important topic. One, a board certified psychiatrist. Another, Donna Bartos from Bloom365, a philanthropic organization that assists children, and with Chris Beck from Soberlink, who has some very unique ideas about how to assist the family and children in making the home a safe place for everyone. So sit back, plug in, and listen to Judge Lynn's rules on child safety. My first conversation is going to be with Donna Bartos from Bloom365, a philanthropic organization that assists children, about how substance abuse, including alcohol, exacerbates any negative consequence or experiences you're having in the home and what we can do to ameliorate that problem. I want you to tell me, what statistically do you know is the interlink between alcoholism, alcohol abuse, and domestic violence?
Yeah, so there is a connection between the exasperation of domestic violence and substance use. I just want to put this out there that substance use, alcohol, drugs, any kind of substance use or misuse is not a root cause and is not a reason for domestic violence. Domestic violence stems from power and control, an individual using their power to control someone else. But we know when substances are involved, that can amplify the abuse and violence. And between 40 to 60% of reported domestic violence cases, now these are just those that make it to a database somewhere, involve a form of substance use. So we know that substance use is one of those ACEs or adverse childhood experiences that you referenced.
Yeah, and we know that it exacerbates the problem. It makes it far worse. It makes people, is there something that we like to do on the preventative side about alcohol, or are we just taking it from the uprooting abuse side? What?
So at Bloom365, our work focuses on 11 to 24-year-olds. And we know that 11 to 24-year-olds have either experienced victimization, domestic violence themselves, have witnessed it in their home, or are perpetrating it themselves. As it relates to substance use in the younger generations, in the younger populations, we help them understand that that is what we call a co-occurring issue. It is something that they might be at risk for if they've experienced or witnessed or perpetrated domestic violence. So that might be a result of the abuse and violence that they've experienced. And we also help them see that substance use in the home or witnessing substance abuse in the home could increase the likelihood that they themselves perpetrate violence or experience victimization. So while we don't work to prevent substance use, we recognize that it is one of those intersecting issues that often rises to the top of issues that young people are facing or experiencing when it has to do with domestic violence.
And when they are in a home with someone who's domestic violence, a domestic abuser, or somebody that could not be exacerbated by alcohol, what are the signs that you see, or do you see any signs? And it's just a disclosure. And please tell them about the elephant in the room cards.
Yeah, sure. So domestic violence is not a one size fits all type of problem. It doesn't look the same for every family or every relationship. It could be verbal abuse and never be physical. It could be put downs, humiliation, threats, more of the emotional type of abuse. It could be telling someone what to wear and what not to wear, who to be friends with, who not to be friends with, not to hang out with family members, because if you hang out with family members, that means you don't love the person who's controlling you. It could be financial abuse, controlling the assets and resources. And what we're finding in disclosures that we receive from students who go through our curriculum is that they're exposed to all of it. They're exposed to the emotional abuse, the physical abuse, as well as economic or verbal abuse at home with a parent, caregiver, or extended family members. Lynn mentioned, you mentioned Lynn, our elephant in the room card system. We know that young people, particularly between the ages of 11 and 24, don't typically reach out for help. Only 9% will ever reach out to a formal source or an authority like a parent, a teacher, law enforcement, or any adult in their lives if they're witnessing or experiencing or in any way impacted by domestic violence. So we've incorporated into our curriculum and outreach efforts where we hand off, pre-COVID, when we're in classrooms, we hand off a card and it has an elephant in the room picture on it. It describes what the elephant in the room means, that thing that no one wants to talk about because it's so uncomfortable, or maybe they have a thought or a question and they're just embarrassed to ask it or afraid they might be shamed for asking it or sharing. So on the cards, and we receive thousands of them a year, is where students are disclosing that they're witnessing domestic violence at home.
So that was Donna Bartos of Bloom365. And as you can see, she is very well versed in this field. And she talks a great deal all over the country about the things that we can do to help our children, help deliver our children a safe upbringing and environment. She talked to us about the adverse childhood experiences, what they are, and how they affect the children. And I think it was a very enlightening conversation that allows us to see the breadth and depth of what children go through when they're in a home where there are difficulties. Alcoholism, domestic violence, all kinds of issues. And my next conversation is going to be with Chris Beck of Soberlink. And I want to tell you why I was so excited to have this conversation with him. I've always known alcohol monitoring in the punitive context. Soberlink, what fascinated me about Soberlink was they use the monitoring to assist and prevent. That's why I was so excited to talk to him. Same reason I was excited to talk to Donna. She's about domestic violence prevention. And on the bench, all I could do was clean up the mess after the problem occurred. You've taken your business to a model where it's not just on the punitive side, which is how I often saw it. It's supposed to be, it's assistance, to family, because you're in a family law circumstance where a substance abuse may be an issue, so you can have real-time, meaningful results that aren't this, there's a lot of back and forth, he said, she said, and it takes all that out, which I think is tremendous.
You hit the nail on the head right there, is that very often when we got into this business and we were looking at how our technology could help, it really looked like, we were struggling. The individuals who have the disease of alcohol use disorder needed something where they could empower themselves to help, earn trust back in those relationships that they kind of lost, right?
Right.
So our technology is able to document that sobriety, and during that documentation process and getting the results in real time, that trust is being earned back. And you're starting to find out that, as you get more and more compliant behavior, we're seeing successful programs. What happens is you get more and more parenting time. So you kind of see it as a parenting equity, maybe.
Right. And not only that, though, that's one side of it, but the other side of your business where you're doing a daily regimented one where people who do have a substance abuse problem are trying to fix it. All of us adults have some measure of brokenness to us. And just because it's an addiction or mental health, neither one of those things are chosen. They are both a disease or an illness that you're dealing with, and it allows you to cope with what you have to allow your children to have a better parent.
You're absolutely right. The stereotypes of alcoholism being a moral failing needs to end. And that's what we're all about. We want to make sure we spread that news that, is not a moral failing. It's something that someone's going to struggle with.
Right.
But there is ways to make sure that you can earn back that trust. You can be part of this recovery circle that gives information to everyone around you and get through this.
Yeah. And that's very important, because I talk about this in the mental health side, but also on this side is, if you get away from the shame of it, and it enables you to raise your hand to say, I suffer with it, and therefore gives you an opportunity to do something about it. But if you leave the shame piece in place, you don't have the opportunity to get people to raise their hands and gravitate towards what you're offering.
Absolutely right.
Now, when you talk about dealing with children, and do courts often ask you to come in and when you have a high conflict parenting situation, or do the parents themselves ask, or is it a variety of means by which they get to you?
Yeah, so I've seen it in all different manners. I mean, we've been asked to come into the courtroom and explain our system to both parties. We've been asked to be involved in a conference call of a mediation that is going on to explain our technology and what our product does, especially when it comes to best practices. You know, what are some of the things that we need to be careful of? You know, I always get hit with the question that probably comes up number one in the internet search results is, you know, what should I be concerned about with breathalyzer technologies? And the first thing that comes up is like false positives, right? And so we actually have a retest cycle that is just like any type of lab test. So you go in and to get let's say a PEth test or an ETG test, and you test positive, that lab will then retest that same sample to confirm it. We do the same thing. Our system actually has a retest cycle where if you do blow positive, the system will lock out, allow you to rinse your mouth, make sure that there's no contaminants in the mouth cavity, and then you'll be able to retake the test to confirm if it was a positive. But then if you blow compliant, we know that there was some type of contaminant that got into your mouth and then had dissipated. So it would be a compliant test at that time. So
well, I would hear that in court all the time, where I had just mouthwash was the thing that they would say, I just washed out the Listerine or something, and this and that or other. Yeah. Does your product pick up stuff like that that's non-alcohol? Well, I guess it does. It has some alcohol in it. So
it does. So that's what happens. We use fuel cell technology. It's been around for over 50 years. And it's a chemical reaction that happens when there's alcohol in your breath that goes into the fuel cell. It will register at some type of intensity. And that intensity is measured and turned into a BAC percentage. So like 0.08 that you're familiar with, right? As a BAC.
Right.
So the more alcohol, the higher the BAC percentage.
Right.
So yes, if you have Listerine in the house, which should not be in your house if you are on a device such as Soberlink, you should eliminate all alcohol products from your house. That's part of the testing protocol, right? This is about your kiddos. This is about trying to find, trying to submit a test to document your sobriety, to get more valuable time to parent your kids. And so if that means eliminating Listerine and substituting it with Scope that's non-alcoholic, it's a pretty easy substitution. So when people come to me and say, well, I just brushed my teeth, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's a tough one, especially with our retest cycle, because all the data suggests that if you have a contaminant in your mouth cavity, such as Listerine, in 5 minutes, it will dissipate. So if we lock out for 15 minutes, there's no reason that alcohol from Listerine should still be in your mouth cavity and causing a positive test.
One of the things I truly appreciated about Chris Beck's conversation is that he shares my view that we ought not weaponize the concerns that people have, either alcoholism, mental illness, whatever it is. Often, especially in divorce cases, they're weaponized and used against the party who is dealing with them. What we're trying to do is recognize alcohol as the disease it is and treat it as the disease it is. So Chris Beck gave me an opportunity to see how the things that I used to use to punish people can be used to help folk. Outstanding idea. Now I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Ish Major. I'm sure you've seen us together as host of Marriage Boot Camp. He is a board certified psychiatrist with a specialty in relationships, and he is going to help us take this conversation to the next level. talking about how all of these issues impact children, how alcohol, domestic violence, divorce, all impact children, and what we can do to make those things easier and better as we go through them. And in case you were wondering how to speak to your kids about any of this, this is for you. Tell them a little bit about yourself so they just know how deep your knowledge is, and then we will kick it off.
You got it. So this is, like you said, I'm a board certified psychiatrist. So I do medication and therapy. And when we're not doing our thing on TV together, I have a detox clinics, and we treat specifically opiate detox. But as you know, there's never just the one thing. And so it's pills and alcohol, or pills and, and so we see a lot of that, and see the effect it has, not just on the person going through it, but on the family members in the house and the generations that they've been trying to get it right and just struggling with. So like you said, it's pervasive, it's insidious, and it's one of those, it still kicks our butt. It just does.
On the regular. And I think I'd like to start out with, I don't think people often, when they drink or drug or do other things, they think, well, I don't do it right in front of the children, or I don't not do it in their white side. Tell me a little bit about how important it is to have a stable parent, and what a predictable parenting relationship does for the security and the ability of a child to grow up well adjusted.
Well, most kids have to have it. Now you've got that odd duck, that rare child who's got a temperament that is so inclined to the calm that they can take it in and do just fine. But most of us are not like that, myself included, right?
Right.
And so it's
Yep.
And I subscribe to the 2-hit theory, right? So
Okay.
the first hit says you may have a genetic predisposition to have some type thing come out down the road, whether it's alcoholism because mom or dad drank, whether it's some form of mental illness, whether it's bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety. You may have it, but if you grow up in a household that's chill and calm and smooth, life is going to be fine. You're never going to have that second hit. The second hit comes if the house is rocking and rolling, or there's a big tragedy, a big drama, or repeated tragedies and repeated dramas every Friday night whenever the six-pack comes to the door. And so you've got to have that, your brain's got to know what that normal is, and your brain's got to know. For a kid, a child's mind needs to know that when I lay my head on the bed at night, I'm going to be okay, and things are still going to be standing in the morning,
And we've talked about this issue about me personally. I'm not going to let you make you repeat anything. I'm going to repeat it on myself. I grew up in a house where my father was a drinker. He was bipolar, but he would drink to come down, and the drinking made him mean. And when I went to bed at night, I was unsure. I did, however, have one parent that was stable. And I want to ask you, if you do have a parent or a child or an adult in the house with an alcohol issue or DV issue or mental health issue, what things would you recommend that they do or their partner do to help solidify the home so it is a safe place for the kids?
Yeah. So the thing that saved you was you had the one, right?
I had the one stable parent who was able to monitor the situation, and she didn't. The beauty of it was she didn't fall into the cycle. Typically, if he drinks, then she's going to start doing something to calm down, but she never did that. She always handled her business. Yeah. And so that part's huge. So if you've got one parent in the house who's drinking, then the other parent, the other adult figure in the house has to be steady Eddie. They've got to captain the ship. They've got to, and sometimes it can be, it can be an agreement between the two. Say, listen, I got an issue, and we know that every Friday or Saturday, this is the thing that happens with me. So on those days, I need you to take over, and I need you, and I need you to man. And so it's the shared responsibility. You're never not doing the business of being married, and that's a part of managing that. If one business partner isn't up to the task, then you got to share that responsibility. You got to shift that load. So if you can be adult enough to do that, that works.
Otherwise, you got to have one parent in the house who got some sense like you had. It's like, listen,
This is what it is. I'm gonna keep this ship afloat. Everybody acting up, but you know, I'm gonna keep this sucker bubble. I love what you said about the business of being married and a business plan, because I'm a real strong proponent of everybody jacked up some way, shape, or form.
You got
somebody got mental health issues going on. I have mental health issues or domestic violence or an addiction. But you can still survive and come together even when somebody's struggling with that. And the fact that you said the business of being married, and then you said you need to talk about it first. It's like having a business plan, right?
It is.
A business plan that takes into account whatever is happening at your house, be it an addiction, mental health, or domestic violence, correct?
Yep, exactly. In the event any of the partners are unable to dutifully fulfill their responsibility,
their part.
Right? These contingencies kick into place. Now, the sad thing that happens with our kids is, you know, in African-American households, 70% is just one female. It's just one woman in there, right?
Correct.
And so
correct.
if the head has a problem, those duties fall to the oldest child. And then we start to see the parentified children being brought up. Then we start to see the kids who are heavily, heavily codependent in their adult relationships because they had to take on that caregiver role when they were way, way, way too young to understand what that meant.
Right, right. If you do have two parents in the home and we're talking about somebody that is addicted, tell me a little bit about the recovery process. You go through it all the time.
Yeah.
You know, addiction, a lot of people think it's a moral issue. I think maybe the decision to pick up the bottle to begin with can be one that can be made. But if you have talk a little bit about addictive personalities and the course of living with an addiction.
Yeah, you know, that you hit right on it, right? When in this country in particular, we are really, really heavy when it comes to judging people with substance use issues, right? And I have found that we typically judge people in the areas where we feel the weakest, right? Because we're trying to feel better about it ourselves.
Right, exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Look at how she's got them kids dressed in this store, right? Because I need to feel better.
You're not so sure about your kids,
right. So that's the thing. And when you talk about judgment and it's a choice you're making, it's hard for people to understand. It's not a choice. I can't tell an alcoholic not to pick up a beer or a bottle as soon as I can tell a diabetic just don't have high blood sugar today, right? You got hypertension, well, you just need to decide to not let your blood pressure go up today, right? It's that same mentality. It's an illness, it's a chemical thing. And so the thing that keeps folks stuck, right? 3 things: shame, depression, anxiety. Those are the 3 mental states that are most highly correlated with alcoholism, right? And the shame comes from the judgment. The shame comes from people thinking you're making a choice to do this to yourself, to do this for your family, and the shame keeps you stuck. The shame keeps you in the closet, and the shame keeps you there. Throwing shame on somebody who's struggling with substance use is like throwing gas on a fire. It's just going to blow it up. And so that's it's got to start there. We got to educate folks to understand it's not that. Maybe the first time you ever picked up alcohol, period, maybe that was a conscious decision.
But after that,
once you turn those receptors on in your brain, you no longer have control of that. You just don't. So the process is a struggle. Strongest habit to kick is tobacco. People typically try to stop 9 times before they get it right? Before they can put down the cigarettes. Second to that is alcohol. Most folks come into and out of rehab on average 7 times. Yeah, it takes
7.
It takes. There's rock bottom, then there's rock bottom, and then there's a rock bottom.
And you can rock all the way down 7 times before you get there.
Yep.
It's interesting that you brought up the point about the shame, and I think society shoots its own self in the foot with that, because especially if you have children, you're going to deny that you have any of these issues because you don't want to be seen as a bad parent. But then you're not able to fix yourself because you're not open to saying that I'm broken, and therefore you remain broken for your children.
Yep. It really is. It really is that. And kids, obviously kids live what they learn, but kids aren't blind, right? They are the most perceptive of us on the planet because they don't have any preconceived notions of how a thing is supposed to be. They just see what it is, you know? And so kids know you're struggling usually before you're able to say it out loud.
Right.
Because they see your body, you know, your mannerisms, they see the look in your eye, they see the voice, they hear and see the things that you try to hide. And so the sooner you can have that talk about it, the better.
I think that's even good advice for children of divorce. Don't you think that, you know, when
Yeah.
you see the marriage coming apart,
Yep.
when do you decide to talk to the kids?
Right? You talk to the kids the first night they heard that really bad argument. When it's right, when our thing is just not vibing anymore and we can't contain it, separate from them. The first time they hear the sly comment that one of you make to one another, the first time they hear the argument spill over, the first time there's that deathly silence at the dinner table. Now you got to have a talk with your kids, right? Because they're thinking, well, they're upset with us. Must be something we did. It must be something I did. And they got to know that that's just not the truth. Hey, parents have problems. Adults try to work things out. We fall into and out of love, but I'm never going to fall out of love with you. Always going to be my number one. And you got it. And it's a quick, simple conversation. At that point, kids like, I'm good with that. Next. Yeah.
And it also kills the uncertainty. It's nothing worse than not knowing what's going on. I remember when I was young and there was a whole lot going on in my house. My thing was what's going to happen between 7 and 9, because that's when we came home. Yep. And if you can give them a sense of certainty by at least explaining to them what is happening and explaining it as a process separate and apart from them, you're killing two birds with one stone.
Yep. Kids love surprises, but they need to know what comes next.
Ooh, another good.
Yeah.
I need to bottle you up and bring you home. Not that you haven't rescued my family enough. He's just tremendous at what he does. I just love this guy. But anyway, Dr. Ish, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate everything you say, everything you do. And I hope we do this again soon.
Great conversation, Judge. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate your trust in me. Now, one thing I wanted to leave your audience with, when it comes to drinking and kids in particular.
Sure.
So as adults, men drink more than women, right?
Okay.
But starting at the age of 12, from 12 to 17, girls drink more than boys.
I did not know that.
So watch your girls close. Watch your girls close. Because again, shame, depression, and anxiety are the big triggers. Nobody has that more with girls.
You got it. It makes all the sense in the world. Make all the sense in the world.
Yep.
I feel smarter every time I talk to you, Dr. Thank you so very much for everything. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Ish as much as I did. I think he has such an extraordinary depth of information on everything. And his ideas about how to approach children and talk to them and deal with it. He's a font of knowledge I always love to listen to. I know it seems like there was a lot of different areas that we touched, but it all comes back to the same thing. It is one of the biggest cliches ever. Our children are our future, but that is so very, very true. And there is nothing that we should not do in order to make sure that they have the strongest, most stable upbringing that they can. Alcohol addiction and abuse has been a difficult thing for years. We used to look at it as a moral failing or something that was criminal, but it's not. We now know, based upon the scientific information, that it is a disease. And we need to have a lot of different tools to assist us because it's a hard disease to fight. And with Soberlink, you have an additional tool, one that will give you the ability to monitor what's going on in the home, to assist you in making sure not only that you're making progress, but that progress is recorded and you get credit for it if you're in a situation where you're divorcing or otherwise in a circumstance where you need to demonstrate that you are a good parent and able to give your children a safe and happy environment. Donna Bartos and I go into schools all of the time. And so we're in touch with children and we know they disclose what's going on in their homes. And so she and I are very much aware of what is happening there as far as domestic violence, alcohol abuse. And we're in a position in Bloom365 to assist that. So it was good to hear from her. Chris Beck allowed us to I love creativity. You know, everybody's always approaching the same problem with the same solutions and getting the same result. This is something new that we added to the equation, something that I wasn't aware of before. And I think it's, you know, you need to layer on all your tools when you're trying to do the right thing, and trying to do the right thing in a family context can be difficult. But this is an additional tool if you do have the issue of alcohol abuse. And I think it's important that we show cures and not just condemnation. And I think what Soberlink does allows us to help do that. Well, I want to thank all of you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something new and informative and some information out of it. And I appreciate you listening to Judge Lynn's Rules on Child Safety.